Hi everyone and welcome to tonight's Truthproof live stream. And I've got to start off by saying thank you very much for everybody who's come on to tonight's chat. You're a great bunch. We see you on here every week and we're really pleased that you're enjoying the efforts that we're putting into the stream. I've got to say thank you very much for all the recent super chats, donations. That greatly helps us. As you know, probably most of you know, we're in the middle of making a film called Wolflands, and we're at a position where we're getting to the finishing line, and every little helps, as it were. So thank you very much for all the super chats. So my name's Les Drake from Digital Creations. I'm the producer of tonight's show, and first of all, I'm talking to the chat. I'm going to go and give a few name call outs. So let's have a look who was in. I've got to thank Deborah Singleton. Every week she comes in and does the moderating. She does a really, really, really good job. And thanks for doing it for us, Debs. Right, let's have a look who we've got in tonight then. Starting from, let's give Umbraman. Welcome to the show, Umbraman. Robert Hilton. Welcome to the show, Robert. And interesting to read what you wrote in the chat there. And let's have a look down. I'm scrolling down, guys. Nicknames in the chat tonight. Alison Buttle, welcome to the show, Alison. And David Kay, welcome to the show again. Teresa Walker, Warren Hardcastle. And I've got to say thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's really brilliant. Now, as you know, you probably read the caption card. You know who tonight's guest is. But I'll tell you what, no better than to let Paul introduce the guest tonight. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Les. And yeah, like you said, we've had Don Lodge on before, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to him tonight. But just a little bit, I think people will have seen his artwork prior to me talking, and it weren't Don's idea. It was mine and Les's idea to put that artwork up, and it's brilliant. And it's pretty modest, is Don, but that's the words for it anyway. So he's an acclaimed artist, writer, and a researcher in his own right. So Don, welcome to Truthproof.
Hi.
No, it's great. It's great to have you on, and I also need to say that Don is responsible for Truthproof website. So all the reports that we get, whether they come to me or come to the website, me and Don go through them, and this is the guy who puts them on. And also the man who corrected all my appalling punctuation and spelling for Night People and Truthproof 4.
To some extent. Let's just say a little word about our website, because not to plug it, because everybody knows it's there and why, and everybody knows it's the best way and cheapest way of buying your books and all that. So that's the advert over. But actually, I have a great relationship with Paul, because although I live 40 miles away, we speak most days, and if not on the phone, we do it by email. Because let me just tell you how the reports part of the website works. And it's great. I mean, obviously, we don't make any money out of it, and Paul has to pay for the site. He doesn't pay me. It's a great pleasure and a hobby to put it up. But what happens is, those of you who've been on the site, you look through things. There's a database that's interactive, and you can put it with time and place and phenomenon and all that sort of thing. And then we encourage you to write your own reports. And then you fill in a box like you get on any other website, and it clicks and it goes out magically to our server. And we've configured it so if Deb sends a report of a ghost she sees in her cupboard, the next day it will be in the mailbox of Paul and I. We've got both email addresses, and so we immediately see, ghost seen in cupboard in Deb's bedroom, blah blah blah, and we look at it, and seriously, we say to ourselves and each other very often, oh, so-and-so sent, UFOs in from Hull. Either, and we have a really exciting debate. You never know what's going to happen. It's either then Paul, then I say to Paul, do you want to phone so-and-so and see if you can get more, or do you want to keep this for the book? And very often what we'll do is if it's a very obvious one, then it's great, and it's a, you know, a report that's a black cat at Bempton or something, and I put a photograph of Bempton from somewhere up, and it goes up, and then you read all about it. If Paul's not happy, we then change it. Paul then sometimes puts little comments and thank yous and little asides, as you'll notice, they get put up there. Sometimes I do, but every time you send a report and it gets put online, it's a result of a discussion, a decision making by ourselves, and often then Paul goes out and does some subsequent research, which he then may put in his big black folder for a book yet to be announced.
Well, that's basically how it goes. You're right, Don, and it's pretty much, it works, doesn't it? It's I wouldn't say it's proven, but it's a method that works. I mean, we don't really sort of argue about it. I mean, half the time odd times you'll say to me, I don't really think this is strong enough, and I don't think, oh, I better go it because Don don't think it's strong enough. You're usually right. You know, some of them just plainly aren't, but we're getting some cracking reports in, and Deb's doing a great job correlating like this database, and it's revealing patterns. I think it is within the research, and
no
you
doubt.
know. So yeah, all in all, it's a great venture, this website. But jumping back to you, Don, I mean, where did the interest start? Where did it ignite for you?
UFOs. Well, I'm not one of these people who've had, sadly, I never saw one in a car park in Southampton in 1971, like a lot of people sort of did. And I'd love to see a really gobsmacking, unconvincing, convincing UFO. I haven't. I suppose I got interested in mainly, I read at school. I remember my mum had a curious taste in library books. I never knew what she was up to. I remember she got, for some reason, I went in her sitting room once and I saw the George Adamski book that's Flying Saucers Have Landed, I think it's called. I mean, everybody my age sort of went on from Noddy to George Adamski. You know, it was a rite of passage having that. And I must admit, I was never totally convinced by him. I always thought he was at too many places too coincidentally. He was either a very lucky man or I don't know, jury's out on him, but I was certainly impressed by him, and then from then on I sort of kept my eyes open for UFO stuff, and I was also lucky. I went God, this dates me. I went in 1969 to do electrical engineering at Portsmouth. It's now Portsmouth University. It's Portsmouth Poly then. And believe it or not, we had a couple of sort of third-year lads who got some money. The students' unions had money in those days, and he started a UFO society. And there was about 10 of us, and he used to give all this budget and buy all sorts of UFO books that I used to read. And so I got together. And I remember one day an old chap, I'm sure he's passed away now, he'd be very old, but he was, we actually got as a speaker the president of Bufora, whoever he was at the time, but he's a very inspiring man, and he liked his pint, I remember, and for a 19-year-old, it was rather cool. So I suppose I've always been, and then I think in adult life, I bought the first book that Timothy Good did. Was that called Beyond Top Secret or something?
Maybe above Top Secret or
yeah. That was quite a serious book. You know, it wasn't too fanciful, and it was good sound stuff. So yeah, and the other side of it, I mean, you and I spend a lot of time talking about this. We try and amalgamate these phenomena and at least look for overlaps in terms of place and time. Is my mother? I think I mentioned her before, but she's had a lot of ghostly experiences, and her family did, and she was very fey and spooky, and dreams, and saw dead relatives before and after they were dead, and this sort of thing. So I grew up with the idea people do that. You know, it wasn't that special.
Just out of interest, then, did she ever say anything or offer anything that swayed you to believe that she was having these premonitions or seeing a seer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's rather paradoxical. My parents were very religious, in quite a boring, shall I say? You know, no games on Sundays and no drink. A rather sort of tough religion. And strangely enough, the fact that the ghosts were around, just it was like the swine, the spirits that Christ cast out. Yeah, I grew up with an acceptance that everybody had ghosts, and she did have a particular dream that she had before someone in the family was going to die, like an extended uncle, great uncle, or something like
Yeah.
that. It was all about his home village, and it was rather hideous. I won't go into them, but they all had a theme of horrible distortion and mutation. And she'd wake up in the morning and at breakfast, oh, I had one of my dreams last night. I don't want to talk about it, which is my mum's language for I had one of my dreams about it, and I do want to talk about it. And so we did. But it was, and then she, because it was day before, it was before we had telephone, I think. She said, "Oh, I've had so Uncle Edward's died last night, and that explains my dream." And again, I just accepted it, and I think, I think you do when you grow with it. That's probably why I'm a bit fey now, because no one's ever told me I shouldn't.
No, well, do you think, Don, that the spirit, the ghost side of things is connected to the UFO side, or if let me just rephrase that, do you think the people who see spirit, as in orbs of light, and hear voices, are experiencing the same type of thing that ufologists are seeing when they see spheres of light? I can only jump to the spheres of light that people see in the forests and the rock anglers see, and they attribute it to a ghost. The White Lady in Dane's Dyke, the ghost of big railings, I'd probably attribute it to some light form phenomena and not a ghost. But do you think we're looking at the same thing?
Well, there's a long answer and a short answer, and I suppose by the end of our little chat, we might well have covered the long answer as well. Because, I mean, the very short answer is yes. I think that these things overlap, and I think one of the reasons we do our databases and why you do your research and you put your little notes in your books and your aside and think pieces is we're very much wondering whether there's links of locality as conduits, there's links with individuals as conduits, also almost like, places that are going to strike lightning. If you're on the top of a hill, it's likely. If you've got a metal pole in your hand, it's double likely. And I think it's a bit like this with all these phenomena.
Yeah.
And I think the more open one keeps one's mind, the more fruitful one's investigations are. And I know you and I largely agree on this. This is why we don't spend loads of time discussing what caused such and such a thing.
Do you know, that sort of takes me to various genres of unexplained phenomena then? The UFO side of it, the ghost side of it. Do you think, like you said, there were a UFO group in 1969. Do you think there should just be an unexplained phenomena group where everybody's welcome and everybody's input could potentially help someone else's belief system? Is it a belief system? Probably that's the wrong words to use, because it's not a belief for myself because I've experienced it.
Yes.
So I know it's real. But anyway.
Well, I like to think that's what you run, actually, because I think, cattle mutilations, of the Linda Moulton House sort or the Bempton sort. I mean, who knows what they're connected to? I mean, I think the great danger in all of this is when we get some of our number who are great enthusiasts, and it's so tempting to make theories about, this must mean that we've got something from planet Zog. And I know a UFO chap, he's not on this forum, and he's explained all what lives around the back of what stars and what planets in the universe, and they talk to him, and he knows the purpose of this, that, and the other. And he's a fine fellow, but it's not very convincing, and he's got it all sewn up. It's just like someone who's sort of so devoutly religious, who they can't question the right and wrong of anything because they know it. That's an analogy. But it's like when people know what UFOs are or know what shadowy dogs are. I think you're stuck because you can't do any more.
You make a good point, and we've said that, and I know I've said it on air. On these live streams, I sometimes switch off. I'm not rude, but you do get people who say, "I'm going to tell you what that is. I'm going to tell you what you saw there."
Yes.
And I've been thinking, well, I'm not an expert by any means, but I've been looking into it all my life, and I have got no clue what these things are.
No,
does it mean I'm stupid? And I don't know. But I've not got the picture, and I think there's a lot of people with a lot more intellect than myself who've done the same thing and not got the picture.
Well, I think I said last time, and it's one of my regular pub things I get, you know, we've all got mates who wouldn't watch this program, who suddenly say, oh, you're connected with those UFO books, aren't you, or something like that. And they, oh, well, I can accept that, you know, like the Lonnie Zamora thing, that might be true, but I don't believe so-and-so. And I always say to people, and I get a bit boring with it, and I won't now, I hope, I always say, don't believe. You're using the word belief. It serves no purpose. You don't have to. I think it's something about the Western culture. You have to get some facts and you have to decide whether they're true or not. And it needs a sort of a bit of courage, a bit of existential leap to live with possible contradictions, that it may be true and it may not be true, but let them both live. And yeah. I very rarely use the word belief to do with you, because I don't believe UFOs. You know, if I saw one, I'd know UFOs. That'd be the end of it.
Yeah, good point. Now, you touched on Zamora case. How much do you know about that, Don? Enough to tell us a little bit about it, because there might be people within the chat who know nothing.
Well, it's one of the better known ones. His name was Lonnie Zamora. He was at a place called Socorro in New Mexico in 1964, and that's probably where I run out of knowledge. But basically what he did, he was a sort of a regular gum-chewing police officer trolling around after a speeding car in a rural district, and he went around somewhere and saw over the sand dune and stopped and saw an egg-shaped UFO on 3 pods, I think, and 3 little figures down a little ladder, and they're all doing what they do, get samples of soil to take back to their university of wherever. And he saw that they looked, I'm simplifying this because it's years since I read, but he saw them and they looked at him, and they got back, and they scuttled up and went back and pulled up the little ladder, and away they flew. And someone else distantly did see a UFO in the sky at the same time, but of course he was on his own, so he went to his grave saying, I saw this, and he never shifted from his story. But of course, being on his own, he's limited. But it was, you know, one of many similar stories. But if it was true, then my God, UFOs exist. If it wasn't true, he was a bit of an idiot wasting all his life repeating a silly story, which cost him socially, as they all do.
These historic cases, Don, are there any that stand out as being more genuine than others to you, or have you not followed lots of them?
Well,
Rendlesham, Roswell, Kecksburg.
The trouble is with all these classic ones is they've all been sort of blurred with time and reportage, and everybody who comes along and wants to make a name for themselves tries to find a new angle. And now it seems very popular to discredit everybody who used to do all this, the researching. I mean, Richard Dolan did a good series. I mean, if someone who was new to it, I'd say get on. I don't particularly admire Richard Dolan's politics. I think he's quite an angry man these days, but certainly he did a good series about a couple of 3 years ago when he took one of the classics and he went into it and told us what we know. And I think he's quite balanced. I mean, to some extent, I like the way he came into ufology, because if he's to be believed, he came in as a graduate of history, of political history, and wanted to look for American government cover-ups, and then came across some big folders with the word UFO on it and thought, oh, I'm going to blow this. I'm going to expose this in 3 months and get my PhD, and I'm going to, you know, tie this one up. And of course, he's still doing it. He never did. But you learn a lot about governments by a lot of the early classic cases, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that most governments of the world have suppressed this subject in the form of there's nothing here, people. Just, you know, you're wasting your time. There's no defense significance. Yet we've got secret files and secret organizations within the military, within government, looking into these things, which we find out later after 30-year rules or lengths of time. It just shows the extent of the interest, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, as we know, a lot of it was to do when it came out, you know, post 1947 and the great events then. you know, it was just after the first nuclear explosions. It was just after the Second World War. And it was the beginning of the Cold War. So everybody thought that every butterfly had a Russian in it spying on them. So they couldn't cope with being an electorate, particularly in America, and see discs over Washington. It had to be, you couldn't admit that you couldn't get rid of them. So they had to not exist.
So that official line then in 1947, or the suppression, do you think that's what's carried it all the way through? We've told the big lie. We'll call it the big lie. If Roswell was true, we can't go back on it now. Look how silly we're going to look.
I think that's what started government attitudes to it. I mean, I think the little green men themselves, he says metaphorically, are the people who actually carried it all the way through, because we got a great picture on the site only last week of what I think is a pretty clear UFO picture. I'd love to know what else it is. And, you know, in 1948, that might have been, you know, on the front of some local newspaper in America as on the fly. So they're still happening. But I think the early days very much formed the attitude, certainly of Western governments, as to what's going on. And I'm sure, you know, people would say from the USSR as well as it was then.
That picture on website that came through, Wayne Bear sent us the picture, and we've not changed his name, people. He allowed us to use his real name, and cycling in a place called Burton Pidsey, which is about 20 miles from here. And it was New Year's Eve day, 2:25, I believe. Stopped on his bike, looking over at a farm. I can't remember the name of the farm, and some wind turbines. And he saw an object appear in the sky, which looked to be above one of the large farm buildings. It could have been much further back. But what's interesting, if it's further back, it's quite large, because we can reference the picture with the door that's in the gable end of the barn. So it's equally as big as that, and that must be 8 foot by 5 foot. And he's got this white object, which he snaps a picture of, as Don's just said, and it's not crystal clear, but it's clearly there on a bright blue day. His next picture, it's gone. He said it just shot away. So an interesting sighting, because, and you know what I'm going to come to next, Don, don't you? The very next day, New Year's Day, so 23 miles away, 23 miles away at Bempton. Not saying it's connected, people, but it's interesting. In a field that had 4 telegraph poles in it, the power, well, first of all, the power went out at Bempton at 3:30. So an hour later, 25 hours later, the power knocked off at Bempton. I think half of the homes in Bempton were out without power. And Northern Grid thought they were a pole down and came and inspected, and the top 4 foot of a telegraph pole is off, and it's just hanging. The wires are still attached at this point. When I got to it, they'd been removed. So they assumed it had just broke at the top. I mean, they're pretty thick structures, aren't they, telegraph poles? We know that wood can go rotten. But what were interesting, I mean, it's a guy who works for a power company who contacted me, and he's totally out of area. So somebody within Northern Power, are taking pictures, and it's circulating. They found this highly unusual. You ought to go and have a look at it. So I did, and it's burnt from the inside out. We put, is there 2 pictures on website, Don? Yeah,
one of the whole thing and one of the cross section that you took.
Yeah. And it literally is burnt from the inside out, people, because they were like the shelled outer core of the telegraph pole on the floor still. And I fetched a section of it home, so I've got the first half of the circumference, and that's just normal wood on the outside, and it's just burnt out from the inside. It was a bright, clear day. Nobody reported thunder. Of course, it could have been hit by a freak bolt of lightning, but there's no evidence of it getting hit from the outside. It's from the inside out. So that's an interesting. I found it an interesting one, and I certainly know you did, Don. Have you any views on it, or have I just covered it?
No, I think you've covered it, and I think we're very wise to stop there, because there's no point in saying, oh, it was some, you know.
Oh, we haven't a clue. Yeah,
a UFO or some freak ball lightning that's never been heard of before, or some parallel to human combustion that we don't understand. I mean, all these things are possible, but it's a very strange thing.
It's a mystery, isn't it? And I think that's what we put on website. You know, not all mysteries have to be connected to UFOs, and it is a mysterious one. And obviously, everybody realizes how tall a telegraph pole is, and this is the first 4 foot, and it's just gone. It's gone by 18-inch sections, just burnt out. So I found it fascinating. Bearing in mind that last year on Newsham Lane, just out of Benton, the power went out again. And there's a guy who gave us the report, said he stood talking to somebody at the opposite side of the road where this happened, who's putting his horses away. Says he's just got a horse, you know, by, what do they call it, the bridle or whatever, and he's taking it to stable. It reared up in the air and he lost control of it, and they couldn't understand it, and it's running round in field. The sheep in the neighbouring field all went and huddled in a corner. And then when they looked over the road, the power lines are bouncing blue flashes all the way up and down them. So they're looking at it, they can't understand. The animals have perceived this before they saw the power lines. It says, and then there were an enormous crack and the tree just split in half. Now me and Bob got pictures of the tree. The power outage can't be denied. And once again, we can't attribute it. It's just a strange one in the same village. Do you know, I noticed on social media that people were commenting that they've never lived anywhere with as many power cuts as that place, you know, and you know, which is, it is quite true. You do get that. And I find it fascinating in view of the fact as well that this week, for the last 2 days, we've filmed the lights over the sea. Because I noticed in chat somebody froze up here. Yeah, we realised that, Stuart. It is buffering for anyone else. Yeah, all froze here. Right, now we're back. We're in the room. No worries. Fine, my end froze briefly. So can you hear us, guys? So we'll carry on. Okay. So if you want, Don, let's talk about a few writers, because I don't know what people heard there, what we were talking about with the strange anomalies that have been happening locally. But if you want to put in chat where we got to, and we'll start up with that again at some point. But let's talk about your views on some of the more famous UFO unexplained phenomena writers, Don.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a great, I suppose since the internet, I'm not like most of us. I'm not a great reader. One person I have come across, whose name keeps popping up, and I thought I ought to try and understand a bit more about, and that's Jacques Valet, which to all sort of serious students, I don't include myself, will be a name they well know. What I have done is I found on the internet, there's one of his books that I think something Magnolia. I've put it up on your webpage under links, so you can down yourself. It's quite legitimate because it was published in 1993, I think. I can't find the note here, but it's a book of his. It's about 400 pages long. So if you want to look at Jacques Valet, go to Paul's site and look up links for programs and down yourself a free copy. Half of it is a list of reportings, because he was a great researcher. He was an astronomer, he was a Frenchman, became an American, a professor. He's a great scientist, so he's got credibility. But what I like about him is, and I say he's not easy to understand, and I don't pretend, I'm going to have to read him again. He's a bit like Paul, in as much that he's good at embracing all the phenomena that come at him. And he sort of tries to tie them together in a non-sort of definitive way and say, you know, these things are happening. What are they all about? And let's not exclude them. Let's bundle them all together. And he mentions fairies and the little people, and he'd be interested in shady dogs. He'd be interested in cattle mutilations, as well as the score of standard UFOs in the cornfield type reports. And what he tries to work out is that these, if you don't mind me going on for a minute,
No, no.
he's one of these people who, I mean, modern correspondence, I mean, you yourself get people writing to you. We use the word dimensional. We say, you know, I don't think they're just people out for a Sunday afternoon picnic from Planet Zog on expedition. It's not a classic Lonnie Zamora thing. That they're out here they're out for a reason, but they don't necessarily be the normal space explorer type things that perhaps we grew up with. And he tries to think that these people they may be space visitors. They may found ways of covering light years very quickly, which we haven't yet, but no doubt it's possible if you're clever enough. But that he says they may well come from, Linda Moulton Howe's uses the word dimensional, which I think is a bit vague because everything's dimensional if it's cubic. But I think what you mean, what she means, is probably from parallel universes,
Yeah.
which, I mean, there's a chap called David Deutsch. He's not a UFO chap, but he's, I think, professor of mathematics at Cambridge. He certainly believes in the multiverse, that with many, 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 probably infinite number of universes like ours, and by making decisions, we can trip into other universes. It's very complicated. It's very contentious, but a lot of, for the forefront of mathematicians and astronomers, a good percentage believe in this thing. Well, if those guys can believe in a multiverse that has interface and that all these little universes maybe following on just a quantum width behind each other, the idea that some green man can go zonk and go to ours quite quickly and go back again, or a deceased person who had a big emotional departure when they were murdered can go zonk and go back, or when we bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that we didn't make a splash that's upset some of the green men in the adjacent one, and to come and have a look what's going on. I think that's a very credible model. I think to go much further would certainly exhaust my mathematics, and I suspect most of us. But he's up for this. I mean, interdimensional, parallel universal, inter-universe travel, all these words, yeah, we can use them all as long as we don't really pretend we understand them. But if we just, I mean, if you don't mind me wandering on for a minute more, I mean, one of my interests since I've been retired is I've been reading quite a lot about quantum. I mean, I did mathematics when I was younger, so at least to A level and degree level. But I'm not a great mathematician, but I can get to first base on a lot of these quantum mathematics things. And I mean, Richard Feynman said, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, then you don't understand quantum mechanics. I mean, it's completely, I won't go into it, but it defies so much logic. So not surprising we can't understand what's going on at Bempton. You know, if the great men can't do it and women can't fathom it, then let's not presume that we do. But no, I mean, if you go down to the other thing, the other end, the strings theory, you know, breaking up atoms, what's the smallest thing, what's the smallest thing? You go down to the string theory, which is very popular and much believed in academia these days, that we go down to tiny little, beyond quarks, tiny little wriggling things of energy that occupy, I think, 11 dimensions, which is totally meaningless for us. We can't picture them. And so there's no such actual solid state in anything. It all wriggles down to these funny little things that are sort of so unimaginably small. We've got 11 dimensions there to start off with. The fact that we can see things flipping between 2 and 3 nowadays doesn't really surprise me. And I really don't allow myself to go any further, because I'm sure that all that knowledge is analogous to what the reality is. But I think it just keeps the door open. Let's not pretend we understand 3 dimensions plus time.
So one of the questions would have been, are we any closer to learning true origins of what is presenting? And we're not, are we?
We're not. And I mean, I think the parallel question to that could be, does anybody in the world know more than we do? Is there some laboratory in America or Moscow or wherever that sort of really has all the facts? I think the answer is no, because obviously I don't know, but logically, the sort of thing I'm talking about, it's a bit like trying to define God. God's not an old man with a white beard in a chair, or else I try and do his job. I think I'm halfway there, but no, seriously, I think once you start trying to define these things, you're absolutely stuck. And I think that yeah, there won't be anyone in any laboratory who knows the whole truth about the subject we're trying to vaguely talk about, because if they had it given to them on a tablet from some alien or some ghost or God knows what, they wouldn't understand it. It's as simple as that. It's like my cat, asking my cat what she understands about what I'm doing now.
And plus the fact that they probably wouldn't share it.
Oh, they wouldn't share it, but they almost certainly they don't understand it, because
No.
we haven't got the mathematics or the intelligence to do it. So they might be a bit further along the way, and I'm sure they've got a lot more information than us.
Yeah. At this point, we'll ask Les if he's got any questions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I do have some questions. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you to Deborah for sending them through to me. So the question.
Hello, Deborah.
Yeah, and question from Mick Park. Welcome to the show, Mick. Yeah, it's a good question. COVID permitting, would you guys like to visit Skinwalker Ranch and compare your research?
Well, I'll just start, because
please.
It's up to listening to Don here, but me personally, I would love to. I think there'd be a lot of similarities, and it'd be interesting. Let's just put it that way, because I'll make it brief, Don, because I want you to talk, not me. I've noted that when different people come to these areas of research where we go, things happen. So it'd be interesting to see if anything happened with a new, not a mindset, but I don't know, a new thought process that's been put out there, whether the phenomena reacts to it. But what would your views be? Would you go, Don?
Well, the short answer is yes. I think my own jury is rather, he's not surprised. Everyone must think I'm the vaguest sod that you've ever had on your programs, because I'm not very committed to firm beliefs. But I've got very mixed views on Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay.
I've also got mixed views about whether we'd sort of get in and see anything worthwhile and how accessible it is to tourists, because I gather loads of sort of hippies want to come down and have a joint and imagine they see things, which they may or may not do. I mean, I gather that can be a bit of a problem in that area. And of course, the other thing is, if I can go off at a tangent, Erica Lukes will be known to some of you. She runs a relatively small, but quite a popular, well, I think she does a broadcast, but also a YouTube channel. And I watch her from time to time. I mean, she doesn't tell many reports. There's not much, the word UFO doesn't get mentioned much, but she interviews a lot of people in the world of UFOs. And I mean, I know her she's had some personal problems which she shared. Her late ex-husband, not late, but her recent ex-husband used to be employed there. So he gave her a lot of negative information about it was a lot of false stuff. It was psychops. It wasn't paranormal or extraterrestrial at all. And she's put a load of stuff out, which I don't pretend to fully represent. But there are a lot of question marks, and she's. I know she's got an agenda very clearly, and I think she's a lovely woman. But I'm not sure how accurate she is. But I'd have to check it out.
It does have a history, though. Before Erica Lukes or her partner worked there, I'm not saying everything that's coming out of that spot is.
Yeah.
You know, in recent years, and I'm not saying it's hype, but some of it could for TV shows. Or for documentaries, some of it could be hype, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I don't know, but prior to all that, it did have this history.
It did, yes.
Strange place. You know, I've spoke to Larry Sespooch, who lives quite local to the area, and he claims as a young man he'd known all about this, and Larry's getting on in years now. Do you know what I mean? And anybody who wants to research him, find him on YouTube. You'll hear him talking about the Skinwalker. And it's fascinating as a now a respected elder who speaks for his communities. Larry's fascinating to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these, these hot spots which, with multi-phenomena, and it goes back in history, Native American things. I don't know the history in detail, but I know there is a lot of, it's not a recent thing. It's not like a Roswell type thing. It's
No.
gone back centuries.
Okay, we'll see whether Les has got anything else to hit us with.
Yeah,
But
well,
yes, we're with tickets, please.
yeah, that's interesting views there, and I've just got to probably add to that because I think, yeah, and I think Paul knows about this, and you might know yourself, Don. But there was a farmer across the main road from there who was also experiencing these ghostly phenomena, creatures, or what have you. So he claims, and I can't remember his name now. Probably somebody in the chat will know. But yeah, so it could be a phenomena that's kind of in that basin area.
Yeah, that moves. Yeah. But I'd been told that this thing is reported on other ranches around the location, and why not? I mean, I've written about Bempton, the area of Bempton, and the strange things that are happening around the area of Bempton, but it's happening all the way up and down the east and North Yorkshire coast. I don't think it's unique or sort of rooted in that spot. Location is key, but it can't just be there. People are reporting things in Speeton. People are reporting things at Ravenscar, which will be 30 miles up the coast. So it's, there's still concentrated areas. If you were looking at the vastness of the world, so all good.
Okay, I'm just going to get another question in for you guys. Umbraman is asking, does Don think our ghosts can bring ET ghosts for mediums to talk to?
Oh, can't wait to try it. Sounds a great idea. I've not have heard of that, but
I have.
Right?
Seriously, yeah. And I'm not into spiritualism or anything, but there is a guy in Bridlington. I'll not say his name, but Bob Brown knows him. Well, we both do, and he claims to channel an ET. I'm not saying. Once again, we're dealing with things we can't prove, but it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, while we're on the question of Ouija, when I was in my very early and foolish 20s, I had a girlfriend, and we got involved in those classic Ouija boards and that sort of thing. And to the extent that I proved to myself, without doubt, there was something there. I mean, it's real, and I won't go into details. But I got to the point of I didn't like it, and I knew it didn't feel right to me, and I felt it was very dangerous. And if someone, I mean, everybody had stories at that time of someone at university had sort of said, "Oh, you're going to die," someone at this board. And I just thought, fuck me, I don't want to be there when that happens. Whether someone's making it up or whether they're not making it up, both routes are hellish. So I've never done one since, and I wouldn't.
No. Well, I've not personally used them, and I dare say there'll be people in chat who have, and people who listen.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean,
and maybe we mixed results, but I think you're right. I think general opinion is it's the dark things to use, and you don't know what you're dealing with. And if we're to believe that there's a reality to it, they do say that the demon side of it, the devil, is a liar and a cheat, and we might be getting told things thinking that we're talking to loved ones and things like that, but we're actually being deceived.
Can I digress?
Yeah, fire away.
Well, only in as much, is it Father Malachi Martin? If people want really good evening, they have long, boring evenings or sleepless nights, get on the internet and look up Art Bell, who needs no introduction from me, the greatest paranormal interviewer of them all, no longer with us now, poor love, bit of a character, but he was absolutely great at the microphone. We'll talk about him. But Father Malachi Martin went in for exorcism. He was a Roman Catholic, something or other, also a doctor, very bright, broad-minded man, but he did very much go in. He was one of the few people in America who if you were exorcised, I mean, there's so many sort of bad documentaries now about haunted houses. He was the one who go out to the real thing, and he tells very painfully about exorcism processes. Obviously he believes in it, and he says if you do things like Ouija board, what you're doing is you're opening your front door and you're going out for a walk. and anything can come in. And
Yeah,
once they're in, it might mess you up very, very much, and even
because
kill you.
so when the door's open, what he's saying is you can't.
Yeah,
restrict it,
so
what they're
that's
in.
right. So I think anything, even a sort of, you know, some weird
So what is the
Satanist thing.
what is the Ouija board, Don? And I'm not saying is this a conduit then that's channeling our emotional thought process in a direction that can access these things, because it's not a piece of wood that folds and we use it, or that's nicely polished that looks good. That can't be the root of what's happening. I think it's the human emotion channeled, the thought process channeled somewhere. And obviously the board is the conduit, but I'm just thinking.
Well, I think there are various models to explain that. I mean, certainly the one we used on a few occasions was homemade with a very light plastic egg cup they would put their finger on, and that skirted around, and we just had the letters and yes or no. And of course, Ouija comes from yes, we, and ya, so yes, yes in different languages. That's the origin of that. But I think it depends on your model, because yes, especially if it's fraudulently done, it's someone pushing them around where they want them to go, or people subconsciously conduits for spirits, or if you believe in the model of, I'm using the word belief again, but if you do think that there's such a thing as telekinesis, which a lot of people, including sort of scientists, think is possible for a point, it could be. I mean, there have been cases of Ouija things going around and flying off the table. Well, that wouldn't be you or I, that would be something else. So I think all or any of the models work, and I don't know enough about it to know which work. But I know there are people who, if you had 4 or 5 experts, you'd get a different story.
Well, I'm not asking you for an answer to this because I know you haven't got one, but what do you think? Is it tapping into our energy? That's whatever it is, this external intelligence that's coming through. Is it tapping into our energy? It's got to be, surely.
I think so. I think the answer is yes. I think we are creatures with souls. I think we're creatures, and that doesn't mean in the sort of be good and your soul go to heaven necessarily, or go to Allah, or whatever your belief. I do think, dear old Linda Moulton Howe, I think she's got a bit too sort of quasi-religious these days, but I mean, she certainly believes that, especially her cats have got souls, even if you and I haven't, there's no doubt about that. But yeah, I think they're tapping into something that, again, is possibly interdimensional, whatever that means. It's something, it's like a heat or a light that just goes out wider than where we are. It can transcend a little bit of time and space and surrounds us, and we'll tune into these things. That's my sort of view on it. Now, if you want to take that further, a bit more, much more clever than I can be on it, I've got a link to one of his things on your page. You don't get this on all the shows, folks, so tune into Paul every week. You've got a link to a chap called Rupert Sheldrake, who's an ex-Cambridge doctor. He's made a life doing sort of fringe avant-garde science, but he's very sound. He believes in sort of universal consciousness, and he would, and I won't tell you all, I won't give you a lecture on Rupert Sheldrake. Do it yourselves if you're interested. But he's a great guy. I'm not saying he's right, but he opens a lot of these doors in our brains that we need opening, that there are other ways of explaining our own consciousness, because he says it's not in the brain. He says everything is conscious up to a little bit, and we all interact, and we all universally remember things, and we know how to develop. We learn off each other as a species, and as a crystal, or as a rock, or the sun. He's fascinating, very convincing, and who knows? But it's on Paul's site, folks.
Well, thanks for that, Don. Just one sec, Les. Just
Yeah, any more questions? Probably the best way to go.
Just one more thing. Do you think objects, because you've just said it's all out there, so do you think objects collect thoughts and some kind of emotions? You're in York, Don. The Wailing Walls of York.
I think appropriate to, I mean, and this is Rupert Sheldrake's answer. I think appropriate to what you are. I don't think there's a stone in your garden saying, Christ, I'd love a fag. But there is a stone that's probably aware of itself in relationship to other stones and its purpose and why it's there. I mean, it sounds absolutely daft what I'm saying, do get onto this guy, because he makes it very plausible, and he's. I mean, a lot of your audience may know much more about him than I do, but he's internationally known, and he's got. You can tune into him on YouTube. He gives regular talks about all manner of things, and some of them are really quite arcane and erudite, and some are sort of quite spooky like this.
Okay, right. We shall go with another question, if that's okay, Don.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the responses from those questions, guys. Very, very interesting. Tim Brennan, welcome to the show, Tim.
Hello, Tim.
Yes, Don, what's your take on the ancient aliens hypothesis?
Oh, are we back in Genesis chapter 6? I would like to ask him. Well, the Nephilims, aren't they? The answer is I'm not the best person. I should think you know more about it than I do, Tim, and you'll be read about it. So I suggest you come on 1 week and do the job properly. I'd love that. I haven't read that great deal about it. I have been reading Genesis chapter 6 about how these Nephilim came down and made all these earth women pregnant, which I thought was horrible, but they all thought it was cool. And I gather the women didn't seem to mind. It's in the Bible. And I know it's hotly disputed. And if you talk to Linda Moulton Howe, then there's all sorts of ideas that we're genetically made up by all sorts of visitors from the past, or we're part of a great big goldfish bowl of someone's experiment for their PhD thesis in some weird galaxy. Who knows? I think it's very unlikely that aliens started in 1947, and I rather suspect, looking at Inca stuff and von Däniken and all those good people. He was an early book of mine. I think that, I mean, who knows? But the chances of things being interwoven with our history, I think, is almost inevitable if any of it's going to happen. Yeah.
So the Nephilim, Tim, put in chat if I'm correct or wrong. Are these the fallen angels, the ones that were cast out?
Yeah, that's right. Some people say, they're sort of in most sort of religions and most of the world's. I think like a lot of things in the early Bible, there's a lot of sort of myths and legends. I'm not against Christians, but the Bible got quite good at soaking up sort of quaint early primeval practices and sort of putting and building them into the story, or building them into our festival. I mean, go to Ely Cathedral and look at all the green men in the architecture. They're gods that the Christians pinched that go back much further. And again, Tim would be the man to talk about these things.
Yeah, just before we leave this, then, it's because I don't know. We've had Tim on here talking, as you know, and I wonder how many people in chat would like to 1 week have Tim on talking about angels, because if we go onto our website, truthproof.uk, Tim's books on there, the Museum of Angels, and as Don rightly says, he's the expert. He's the guy to sort of educate us on some of this. He might not thank me for calling him the expert, but I think he's far more of an expert than me. Any more questions, Les?
Yeah, I'll just move on to a topical one, and it's kind of in the news at the moment. It's from Umbrum. Oh no, I'll get Mysteries and Monsters.
Mysteries and Monsters.
Yeah, welcome to the show, and thanks for the chat. Paul, any thoughts on these reports about these dogs falling ill in Whitby and I think elsewhere on the coast? On top of all that, the dead crabs and fish that were washed up.
It is interesting. I haven't got formed any opinions. I spoke to my daughter about it today, funnily enough. Sarah, who lives in Caton, because it's all the way from what I believe, Fraysthorpe, right up to Robin Hood's Bay. The dog walkers or on the beach, it's not just one off. There's hundreds of people having to take the dogs to vets, and my daughter, they've had to take theirs. That was a few weeks ago, but it's been going on for weeks. And the shellfish, and surely some government body would have taken these shellfish away and tested them, and we'd have had an answer by now, because there's literally not just thousands, there's tons of shellfish being found, which quite frightening when you think about the shellfish that we've got in the food chain. Yet there's thousands of them just littering the beaches, or there has been, from time to time over last month or so. That combined with the dogs being ill, and it's made lots of newspapers, and I think it's made national newspapers now. So it's an interesting one. Just I'd have thought it was some residue that's in the water, not necessarily because the dogs are in the water, but it's the tide's ebbing, it's in and out in it, and the dogs are bombing up and down, probably grabbing a ball that's been in the water. There's got to be a reason, and surely by now, particularly with the shellfish and the fact that we all eat, well, if we do, a lot of people like crab, lobster, mussels, then we should know. We should have an answer, because there's got to be a reason why all them shellfish, it weren't freak storms that washed them up, they were just dead. Big crabs, lobsters, everything. And I don't know as I've seen a conclusion to what toxins or what was in the makeup of when they've analysed stuff for these shellfish. Have you heard about this, Don?
I've heard about it. I've also heard that Britain's waterways are becoming more polluted. So whether it's sewage or something like that, I don't know.
No, crap. Yep. Les, have we more?
Yeah. Well, I'll put a couple more in here.
Joe Weeks, humans pumping crap into the sea. Yeah, I'm glad you've put it in capitals, Joe, because that's probably what it. Well, I'm saying we don't know, but it could be. Look at what's happening with rivers.
Yeah, that's it. I'm more inclined to think it's sewerage issues than.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we're on a channel here where we're talking about UFOs, aliens, cryptids, but as we say on the website, not everything has to be a mystery related to that kind of thing. I mean, most of the things will be man-made mysteries.
Okay, then. So Umbraman is saying, I wish TV shows would just report the facts rather than embellish for effect. If any subject doesn't need embellishment, it is this one. What are your thoughts, Paul, Don, and Les from Umbraman?
I think people are very conservative, because a lot of people, especially when money's behind it, you can't afford to offend people. I mean, if anyone's rude on this forum, Deb Singleton does their legs, which she's great at doing, because that's not what we want. But if we were doing advertising for Head and Shoulders shampoo, we'd have to be careful who we didn't upset. So I think that applies to quite a lot of the way a lot of news is bland, and also the BBC, I think, is very feeble these days. It's a bit of a cork on a political sea. I think it bounces either way. So, I mean, one of my favourite rants these days is Wikipedia, which I love Wikipedia. I mean, if I want to know, what musicians were in the searches in 1968, Wikipedia is the place to go. It's wonderful. But if you start looking up UFO stuff on Wikipedia, they automatically assume that anybody who I'm generalizing, but anybody who is, Roswell was the scene of an alleged saucer landing held by a few extremist nutter twits, close bracket. It's almost at that level. So they don't, because they can't afford to give any loose ends. They have to have things.
Why do you think that is, though, Don, with a subject then that they're so dismissive of? Why do you think when we get, I think we touched on it earlier, we get government agencies, the MOD, the military establishment, releasing files that they said never existed, talking about things of no defence significance, yet it proves to be of enormous defence significance in later years, and reports were done and studies were done on these things of no significance. Why do you think that is? Or have we touched on it with Roswell?
Well, I think, yeah, I think we probably have.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I might come back on that.
No problem. And if Les ain't got another question, I mean, what are your views on the animal mutilation all over the world? I don't just mean in one specific area. What, obviously, once again, we can only theorize. Is it people? Is it aliens, for want of a better word, or do you think it could be both?
I think it could be both.
It has
Obviously,
to be. Yeah.
nobody knows, and although it's quite topical these days to criticise dear old Linda, you know, Auntie Linda Moulton Howe, as she sort of come into. She did some great work on it, and I think her early stuff was really good, and I really respect her. And she's always quoting when she met these law enforcement officers, has said, you know, we've seen these, and Linda, the people that we know, we've seen the lights. The people who did this were not of this world. I think that's as accurate as you can get on that.
How far back does that go, and what she's quoting?
I think she did it in the late 70s, wasn't it?
Is
When
that when
she
it,
did,
I don't
she
know.
did.
Is that when it was? You know,
I think it was about that time. Perhaps someone could flash up on the thing if I've got it wrong, but I think it was about 1980. She did Strange Harvest or something like that, wasn't it?
which is a brilliant title, really, isn't it? You know, it really
Yeah,
is.
and I think that's really it. So, I mean, so who knows? I mean, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that why aliens would want to get an animal and hoist it up, drain it dry, cut some funny bits of it out and bung it back again, defies any logic. But then so does my cat wonder why I put a record on and listen to it. That defies logic. You know, we don't understand it. So let's not say it's not sensible. It's just beyond our sense.
Do you know, there's some strange things that if I just bear with me for 2 minutes and jump to Bempton and these strange animal deaths there. One of the last ones that I got to this place very early in the morning, either just before first light, just as it's getting light, get into the field. The farmer had previously told me 2 or 3 days before, because I haven't got these details in front of me, that one of his sheep, lambs, had gone missing. Now it was half grown, but big as a Labrador dog. And he said his 2 dogs had been scouting the field with him. He'd been round in his truck and he's looked at it. We'll call this lamb number 35, because that's what I think it was, because I'd no longer have the pictures. Can't believe I deleted all pictures of P900, because as Les knows, I've got hundreds of pictures of these animals, but this particular one I don't. So he told me this 2 or 3 days before, and I end up on this field. I think it would be Wednesday morning or whatever. And I open the gate and I look up and I can, all up the field, it's just grass. I don't know, 10-inch high, no more. There's nothing. I do a grid pattern of the field. I walk into the wood, walk around the wood, and I come back. I don't do a grid pattern. We've already done it. And I leave the field. As I'm bolting the gate, putting the snake on the gate, I look up the field. I see this white thing in grass that weren't there before. Weren't there 2 hours before. I knew exactly what it was. Didn't know it was that sheep or that lamb. So I walked up to it. Front left leg missing, eyes removed. There's one ear gone. It's, once again, I always say this, and I don't know, I'm not trying to sound macabre, but it hadn't been opened up. No animals had predated on it apart from these wounds. So it's getting towards 8 o'clock, and I rang the farmer up and I said, what number was it? The sheep, the lamb that you lost. I wish I'd stopped saying sheep. Sorry, guys. What number was it? And it's 35. I said, well, it's here. I said, literally, when you open the gate, you can't miss it. It's there in front of you. I said, but it weren't there at 4:30. His analogy was, even though all this strangeness were going off, and I think a fox took it, it's maybe brought it back. And there's no way. I mean, I think anybody, you know, but he's looking for an explanation that will kind of fit with what he wants to believe, I think, because there's no way. I put my hand on this animal and it was absolutely cold, but it weren't bloated. When they've been left for a few days, this kind of swell up. And that one's puzzled me ever since, because I couldn't have missed it. So I believe something had really sort of freaky, really sort of woo had happened there. Mm-hmm. And I know I've just sort of rambled on a bit there, Don.
Must be a very wimpy fox if he sort of felt guilty and felt he ought to put it back. You know, yeah. That's pretty unusual.
It's highly unusual. Yeah, honestly. Well, it's not. It's not even. I don't think it'd happen, would it?
Can I just another plug for your website? You don't get this on all the other sites, folks. Here we are talking about cattle mutilations. For me, one of the most convincing stories of anything bizarre. Go on Paul's site, look at the YouTube link for Montana sheriffs. They may be deputy sheriffs because I haven't looked for a long time. They're two lovely old chaps sat in their kitchen being interviewed, and they tell their stories about veterinaries who came along and were suspicious and wouldn't work with them, and cattle mutilations. And they are not Oscar-winning actors. They're either bonkers, which they're clearly not, or they've worked with this phenomena for decades. There we go. So Montana sheriffs, folks, do have a look. It's good.
Well, when I was looking into Wilsthorpe, I went to a farm close to where all this was happening, Bridge Farm. And I get speaking to the guy. I'll not say his name. He was really amiable, interested in what I was looking into. This is the guy who's combined harvester hit the head of the crop circle, and his dog sat up in the cab, which I've spoke about before. And he got on about a sheep this time, fully grown, that he'd found, for want of a better word, mutilated. He said, I came out to look at my animals this particular morning. He says, there's a fence, 40-inch high with a row of barbed wire along the top of it. He says, sheep don't jump. I mean, I dare say they can jump a bit. He says, but if it had jumped, we'd have seen wool on the wire and everything. He says, I went out. He says, in neighbouring field where there's no livestock and it's just sludge and sort of liquidy slurry, so no prints. He said, I'm looking at this sheep. He says, and I can't believe it. He says, I mean, if he might get to listen to this, but this is the truth of it. And he told me the story. He says, and I walk over to it. He says, it's still alive. He says, and its eyes are removed. This sounds terrible, doesn't it? You know, and he said, and it's got some other injuries, wounds to it. He says, and I look at fence and there's no wool on fence. He says, and then I'm looking and there's no footprints, animal or human, where it is, and it's sludge. So I ring the police. They come out. He says, well, it's obviously jumped fence and damaged itself. So it's lost its eyes, jumping fence. I think is it DEFRA come, remove the animal. He says, I rang several times, contacted them, wanting to know. He said, it jumped a fence, it's died, that's it. And they didn't tell him anymore. And that one's puzzled him ever since. I realise most of the stories that I'm telling don't have a conclusion. I don't think many do they, Don?
No.
So, are we out of questions, Les?
No, I've got a few more questions.
Yeah, go for it. They're all relevant.
Yeah, it's great, folks, and really enjoying this tonight.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 minute. Just following from that point, if people out there have a particular YouTube link or some other link and you think that we would find it interesting, send it in and we'll put it on the site, because that's how we learn and share.
That's brilliant, Don. Yeah, and likewise, UFO, unexplained phenomena reports.
Yeah, about anything.
Yeah, we want them. Yeah, please do.
Yeah,
and
that's great info, Don. So I'd just like to add, just to tail on to what you was just talking about there, Paul. And you mentioned the government agency DEFRA. How much do you think they're covering all this up?
I don't know. It's an organisation where you can't get anywhere with it. So whether I really don't know, Les. I'd just be speculating. They must know something's happening, and just like I believe that Coast Guard realised that some of this phenomena that's seen over the sea, they know that it's not flares, it's not meteorites, it's not unusual adverse weather conditions. And I don't think you deploy multiple agency lifeboats and leave them out there for 7 and 9 hours looking for things. If at the end of the day, the conclusion is it's a false alarm with good intent and it were a meteorite. I know I've jumped from DEFRA. I haven't got an answer for it. Don might. I don't know.
Well, I don't know about DEFRA, but I think, again, the sheriff video and other things, I'm sure Linda Moulton would say, that the trouble with, if you bring in any, specialist observers or any special witnesses or scientists in, they've got to think about their jobs. So you couldn't, I mean, if I was a vet and I went out and saw a field and there was a dead sheep in it with all sorts of strange things wrong with it and no footprints, I'd think twice about going back and writing up, saw dead sheep today, don't know what the hell killed it. Because that means I'm not a good vet as far as other people are concerned, or I'm a nutcase thinking it must have been aliens. So I think people are very protective in the sciences, all of them. I mean, like it used to be with policemen, I think they're getting better at that sort of thing now.
I think in that.
Sorry,
Yeah, I think in that case, then, Don, we're waiting for a really good whistleblower to come out.
One of Linda's whistleblowers, yes.
I tried 3 different vets with the images that I'd taken and a lot of images of the livestock, and none of them would touch it.
No.
They wouldn't. I spoke to one off the record who he just hadn't got a clue what were going on, but he weren't willing to jump in, but the others just didn't want to know.
No. There you are.
Okay, I think I've got another couple of questions, if it's all right with you guys.
Yeah, fine, yeah.
Yes. Here's a good one, I think. Just bear with me while I scroll back up.
Right,
a few more questions have just come in.
I'm just going to ask. Go on, Les.
Does Don and Paul have a view on Ted Phillips's work at Marley Woods?
I don't.
I'm afraid I know nothing about it.
No,
I wish I did. Send us a link, whoever it is, and we'll have a look at it, please.
Yeah. So Warren Hardcastle, thanks for the question. Our guys tonight don't know anything about the case, so if you want to put a link somewhere where we can all see that, that'd be great. Okay, Paul, was you want to say
I was just going to ask Don if he thought any government agency or group of individuals is sitting on information that could potentially, I don't know, change the world or change everybody's belief system?
I think they're sitting on more than we are. As I said earlier, I don't think they'd be able to tell us the whole picture because they wouldn't know it. And if they did, they wouldn't understand it and be able to communicate it to us. And of course, the other theme that runs through, I think, Richard Dolan and Linda Moulton Howe and people like that, you know, the frontline popular people at the moment, is they're very aware what would happen to some religion and some religious folk. And I'm not saying that they're right or wrong. I don't have a view on that, but I think there's certainly, we know there are some people, both Muslim and Christian, I can't speak for other religions, I don't know much about them, who would be horrified to think that our creator wasted time making green men and not just us.
Right, yeah. Right, so leading on from that, who do you think, Don, if anybody, has broken any new ground within the last 10 to 20 years within the subject of not just UFOs, unexplained phenomena, brought new ideas to the table?
Well, I mean, there's a few people around, you know, a lot of people who are on our local internet. I mean, everyone's struggling away, doing things at a lower level, which I think things like Facebook has allowed. I mean, we know all our friends and, you know, people like, I don't know, Dave Hobden and people like that, you know, and our friends in Swansea, they go out and you look at the Swansea videos, they're thorough bits of journalism with real people in real streets who saw real things above real houses. They're as good as any of the old classics. So I think it's to do with popularizing. And I think that's what social media and the internet have. We're not just buying hard-covered books now. We're actually getting out and all doing it to very varied standards. So that's one big area. I mean, I think things like that have been bubbling away in the States is quite interesting, of partial disclosures and New York Times and Tic Tac, and the fact that things have been released. What's the motive? Don't know about that, but it's getting there. It's getting there, but we'll never get headline disclosures here for some of the reasons we've mentioned. It will rock the stock exchange. It will make the churches angry and put a lot of other people out of business, I suspect.
Okay.
Not least all us UFO journalists.
So jumping from that then, totally different one. Have you any views on Bob Lazar?
Not that I knew. I mean,
Well,
who
do
knows?
you think the guy was at Area 51? For anybody who's never heard of him, I'm sure everybody in chat has. He allegedly worked at Area 51 back engineering
I
alien
think
technology.
I think if I had to force an answer, I'd say, yeah, I think he probably was. I think, like all these people, something happens to them, and probably like Travis is the other great one. Travis, well, they do some things subsequently, or they say some things, or they get in some legal allegation about a book, and it immediately means people can start firing at them. I think no one's a saint, so I know Bob Lazar allegedly was not a great saint subsequently in parts of his life. It doesn't mean he wasn't there. I don't know, but I think he probably was.
Yeah,
I think better people than me think he was. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think he was. That don't mean I think I'm better than you, Don.
We won't debate that.
Yeah. So let's get to Les then. Did you have a question for us, Les? Or have I put you on spot? I thought.
Okay, yeah, getting some great questions in tonight, and thanks for the questions, you good people. I've got to say, we've just got to get another little plug for people who's joined the show late. Can you please tell us, Don and Paul, about the website?
Go on, Paul.
Well, I was going to say that I'll leave that to Don, but Don's responsible for putting all the information on the website. We, like Don said earlier, at the start of this live stream, we sort of get quite a few emails in, and we sort of discuss whether there's any merit in the sightings. And I would have thought that 80% of them will go up there. I mean, we haven't got hundreds and hundreds, but it's slowly growing, and they're all first-hand original accounts, which is brilliant. And Don's responsible really for putting it all together. So, what more do you want to add on that, Don?
Not really. Other than it is an enjoyable task, and we sometimes get people feel free to use us. I mean, we don't want damp shoulders, but we quite often, probably one a week, we get a message. Again, as I said earlier, just people who missed it. Once you fill in our boxes and your email and put a name in, it needn't be your real name if you want to call yourself Molly the Goldfish. That's fine. But then we both get it. It goes through our server, and we both get a copy of that email, which we then knock around and change. And if you want to, you can always, if you want to send any pictures, you can always send them via Paul's email on the site. We sometimes we had one this week, and we won't go into details for obvious reasons. But someone's seen something. Probably you'd call it of a spiritual nature, certainly a spooky nature, which is very upsetting, and he wants Paul to know about it and not to go public on it. And it's obviously a very moving event for this individual. And if he's listening, then do send either email it to Paul's particular email on the site, or send it to us both again. Of course, you'll be totally confidential, but if you just wanted one of us to chat about it and decide, whether even if you want some help from somebody who might even done that very often, but if someone actually wanted some counselling for something, we'd try and help you and use our network of friends to try and get something for you. But we do get a few really quite personal things that have happened to people that aren't that sort of fantastic in terms of journalism and too private to share, but they're very powerful and obviously very, very important to the person or even the victim concerned. Isn't that right, Paul?
I would agree, Don, and I think they're just as important as the information that we're sharing, because if it filters through that we can be trusted and we're not going to share information and we are going to offer a friendly ear. I mean, I'm not going to profess to be a counsellor and try and give somebody advice on something I've no knowledge of, but you hit it nail on head then, Don. If we knew somebody that could help, we'd point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so we do from time to time get that type of email, and we'll help wherever we can. And what more can we say on that? And moving on from that, have you any questions, Les? If not.
Yeah, I'll just move on.
They're all good questions.
They're interesting, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just move on with another couple of questions. Yeah, some really good questions, as you say, Don. First of all, I'm just going to mention, come back to me, yeah, is that Paul Sinclair and I, Les Drake, are involved in making a new film called Wolflands, and I thought we'd just throw a little peek. Paul ain't seen this photograph, but I'm just putting it on the screen now in the middle of filming last week, and I think the expression on Paul's face there is, I know you can't see it, Paul, is when I asked him, it's when I asked him for that tenner back. So, yeah, kind of shock horror. So, yeah, a little bit of fun there. Yeah, and yeah, filming is still in progress for Wolflands.
You're watching it for 60 minutes or 90, whatever it is, and you think, I don't know, there's not that much involvement, but it's absolutely it's mammoth. I mean, we're filming tomorrow. I'll not go into detail what we're filming, but this is for a 4-minute segment. We filmed all day last Friday for this. We've been to various places around East and North Yorkshire just for this 4-minute segment that we're slotting in to build around someone else's sighting. It's just strengthening what they saw. And you've probably seen Les and myself putting various messages out asking for props, which Leslie Bryce, thank you very much, Leslie, for supplying us with the mannequin, which were very welcome, and it's being used, and it will get used tomorrow. So yeah, I'm enjoying Wolflands.
Okay then, so I'll just run with a couple of questions, guys. Let's have a look. Right, I probably missed one out here, but I'll ask this one from Lisa Odd. Welcome to the show, Lisa, if you're still with us. Does Paul or Don know anything about the law of one?
I don't.
Nor me.
The law of one. I don't know anything myself, so I can't add to that.
If you want to make it brief, Lisa, so that if you can just give us a bit of a direction in chat, we can maybe throw it at us, and I probably still won't understand it.
Or send us a link and we'll share it with everybody.
Yep, very good.
Yeah, Umbraman is asking, do you think some kind of phenomena could be an, I'll probably pronounce this wrong, egregore created by collective consciousness?
I suppose it's possible. I know Andrew Collins talks about the egregore, and I've got to admit, and fair crack to Andrew, I thought it were a word he'd made up when he was talking about it. But yeah, he talks about the egregore, and he talks about the potential for this to be this type of phenomena to be taking place around all these places of high strangeness. What's your views on this, Don?
I don't really know, to be honest.
No.
I think I can't really add to what you're saying.
No, well,
I've got a subject tangential to that when you will get going again, which might cover some of it.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll move on with another question then. Probably get another couple in here. Let's have a look. We've got a question from David Sadler. Has Don heard of the theory that reality is not real? This has been proven to be true by maths. We're talking about that earlier, weren't we?
I'm not so convinced about the last bit. I mean, there's a great load of debate. Is mathematics real, or is it man-made? Is it discovered, or does? And that's another parallel thing. Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of philosophical movements throughout the ages, of which I'm not an expert, and I think probably Scientology is one of them. Christian Scientists in another. I don't know, who sort of basically say we don't exist and we're all figments of our own imaginations. And some people say, well, it's created by God, and some people say, no, it's created by my God, and other people say it's created by no God. So who knows? I mean, the other lot is we're all on someone's computer somewhere as part of a giant computer game. Again, I don't see strong proof for it, but I wouldn't rule any of it out. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert any more than that.
Okay.
Do you want another question?
Hold fire for a minute. I just want to ask Don, while it's in my head, because it'll float away. If you, Don, could experience just one part of the phenomena, be it UFOs, be it ghosts, whatever, what would it be?
Oh, I think because of my age and my background, I'd like a Lonnie Zamora. I'd like to actually be out, preferably with someone else and a decent camera, and see one land. I think that, I don't care where it was from, as long as it didn't zap me with a gun. I'd love to see that. If I thought I saw one in a field, I'd walk towards it rather than run and hide.
Yeah, I think I'd probably.
I mean, having said that, if you said to me, "Oh, you must come and stay at the, Bridlington Priory overnight because there's a ghost that comes out every day," I'd be down there. I sort of, my sort of unprovable thesis is that the people who are most scared of ghosts and monsters are people who don't believe in them. Yeah, it sounds quite apparent, but you go around your friends, each of you go around your families, the people, and I've got a niece like this who's lovely, but she doesn't believe in anything that you couldn't sort of have in the room with you. But she wouldn't sit in the dark, in case a ghost got her.
That's really interesting, that, and true. Yeah, I've not really thought about it like that, but yeah, so many people, they don't believe, but they don't want to dabble, they don't want to get involved, do they?
But do you not think that the other side of that is that people don't believe, because where we came at the top of the page, it needs quite a lot of existential courage to actually say, I don't know. It probably might be true. They might be coming from anywhere. And I think people who have, we all have mental defenses. They're very well categorized, and you learn them on counseling courses. Ego defenses, psychological defenses. And I think one of the very strong defenses is, I don't believe in ghosts, therefore I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'm going to try not to be, and I don't want to believe your story, and I'm not going to believe in one till I see one, which is another bit of an opt-out. And I think it's a defense mechanism. And I don't laugh at people. We've all got defenses. Yeah. But I think it's one of them. And us who sort of prepared to believe in any old crap, we're not afraid of any bugger. Well, I just say to people, I'd much rather meet a ghost than a burglar when I got home, I tell you.
Well, these are, I don't know, a bit of a sweeping questions, but how can we break the stigma then that's attached to the subject?
I think by carrying on. I think we're doing the right thing. I think we're making it friendly. I'm not being soppy, watery-eyed. I think you've got a great community going. You've got some great ideas that you just sort of generated, and I'm sure a lot of your success has come, by accident and chance meetings with people and that sort of thing. And I think by making conversations and chats like this friendly and human, and I'm not bloody expert in anything, but you have me on the show, and I'm not afraid of making a fool of myself. Some forums I would, so what I'm saying. It's very nice that we got Debs down the road, and we've got the Chris Turners, and we've got all your mates all around who may drop in and out. And I think it's a lovely community because we're all gently holding our hands in the dark, walking slowly forward.
Yeah, you're right. And, I think briefly jumping to Wolflands, Les started working on Wolflands with me. And I don't mean he's done a full 360 and become a believer, but after listening to witnesses, I think you've probably changed your views on potential that there's a reality to what these people have seen, haven't you, Les? You can hear this, can't you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as I probably said before, yes, what I do think is that people come to the table with a story, and there's no benefit, as I see it, for these people to do that, because there's no exposure. They've signed the documents. They know it's going to be exposed, so the ridicule factor still stands. So you've got to then say, well, the story is worth more than the ridicule factor. The story what they've got to tell, which is haunting them, and a lot of people, and I've said it before, these people in the film that we're making now have come 10 years down the line before they've opened up and told anybody, and they've come straight to Paul, which is a testament in Paul's character in itself.
20 in some instances, Les, you know. And
yeah, 20. Sorry, I meant to say 20 actually. Yeah.
No, well, no, you were right, because there's varying degrees. I mean, you know, the guy at Skinning Grove, that's haunted him since a teenager, and then we've got the gamekeeper, 22 years, is it? It's a long time.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I'm open-minded, and probably like Dawn, you know, if it's out there, I'll listen to it and then absorb it all.
Yeah.
I think what I don't like, and I'm going to try not to mention any names, but I think we could all find one or two, is, you know, we're all only 50%ers when it comes to being wise and clever and capable, and we all make mistakes, and we all perhaps listen to the wrong person or write the wrong thing down at times. I don't like that. You know, all right, it's right that we should query Bob Lazar and things like that. But there is, amongst probably the professional circuit, an unfortunate habit, is all I'll say, of vilifying certain people. And I think we could talk about a very prominent English ufologist who is regularly vilified, who actually, I don't know him, but I think he's a fine fella and he does his best.
Yeah, I think I know what you're on about. Like you said, we don't have to say any names, and he's certainly brought quite a lot to the table.
Yeah, and thoughts as well.
And written books, and I don't know. I think what's happening in some instances is it's a small pond, and there's not enough room for everybody who wants a name or wants a voice.
Yeah.
And they just gang up en masse and push people out a bit like cuckoos. And it's a shame, really, but that's the way of things. So, right, just one more thing. I think I've just got a couple of questions. But do you think then, Don, anecdotal evidence en masse should be considered as proof? Because everybody will say, like, well, anecdotal evidence, it's not really proof of anything.
Well, I think it's very interesting that whatever particular phenomenon you're talking about, whether it's sort of cryptids or UFOs or anything in between, and ghosts for that matter, you don't have to go far to find many reports that are virtually the same by people who were totally independent in space and time.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a coincidence.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very strong argument. I mean, I think one of the interesting, if you don't mind me just going off for another 5 minutes, I think following on from that, I think one of the interesting games I like playing, which I hinted at earlier, is I don't really spend all my time down pubs speaking to strange people, but I do a bit. And it's a sort of bit of a game. What would, if you had to convince your cousin what you're doing is an absolute cranky waste of time, which stories or which websites would you bring in to, you know, which would you point to? And it's quite an interesting game, and I think that sort of changes. Now, obviously, your site has got a lot of stuff on, and some of you know, to the cynic, some cases are stronger than others. And another point I also say down the pub, which often gets people thinking, well, you got all, and by the time they've gone through 10 UFO sightings, it could be so and so, it was something stuck on a washing line, it was a frisbee, and all the normal stuff. You think, well, actually, all the reports during history, you only need one to be true, and you've got a phenomenon. Yeah. And then you're crapping yourself, because you don't know what the hell it is. So that's you only need one of this. So I'm quite happy for, you know, stuff that comes to us through our hands, we filter a bit and put on the site. I'm quite happy for 10 of them to be like Project Blue Book. You know, 10-20% of them are quite explainable or mistaken or done by people who are a little bit eluded, confused, or best will in the world, but didn't do it very well. So that's one thing. Let me just do a brief 2 or 3 names and point people, because I like doing that actually. Is one of the people that got me into UFOs in the last decade very much. I'll say the YouTube era of ufology. was Peter Davenport. I think he's a lovely man. He put a personal endorsement of your site when I wrote to him. He's recently updated his own site, worth looking up. Links on your site, of course, goes without saying. But the NUFORC, the National UFO Research Centre, whatever it's called, Peter Davenport, that's up there, and it's got a slightly he's modernised the website. It's not as interactive as yours, sadly, but he has got about 20,000 reports up there, so we've got a bit of catching up to do. But you can put it in different categories, so it's more manageable now, and it's a nice site. One of my most convincing ways of well, one of the best ways of convincing people that there's something, and it's very good entertainment, is his predecessor was a chap called Robert Gribble, who was a retired fireman. He had a place based in Seattle, I think, in Washington State. And if you look up, again, I think there's links on your site, easily findable on the internet. There's a whole load, when they used to have a reporting center, and he used to sit there, it seems, day and night answering one telephone, but he also had a tape recorder. And there's like 100 different hours from the years 74 through to 77. It also covers the Travis Walton thing came in at that time. From the original phone calls, says, hello, I think I've sent a UFO. And you go through some of those, and some people obviously quite sort of upset, a bit unreliable, and maybe the odd hoaxer. But they are 95% absolutely gobsmacking people. I've just been chased home by a green light that went over the car, did this and went off, and my wife cried and did, they're so emotional. They weren't making it up. And there's so many of the same. Typically at that era, it seemed to be UFOs going over cars in the middle of nowhere and following them, and they thought it was a police car, and then suddenly it comes right up behind, and this bloke stops, and the bloody thing goes over him. And then he stops completely, and then the thing comes back, and then he goes on, and then it flies up at a great speed, and he comes home shitting himself, understandably. Now, people don't make that up and then phone him up and give such a convincing story, and there's hours of that.
What year were he prolific, this guy?
I think 74 to about 77.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking, because I know that you pointed me in the direction of this chap. There'll be a lot of people, myself included, until you highlighted it to me, who are missing out on lots and lots of first-hand UFO reports that are out there. So I highly recommend it, because I've listened to quite a few of them, and so yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Have you got questions, Les? Because I'm just going to ask Don something else. If you haven't.
There's a couple more questions before we lose track of all. We've got plenty in, and thanks everybody for sending the questions in on the chat.
Fire the questions.
Right then, there's a good question from Nickname. What is Don's most compelling story of Paul's?
Oh, I was asked that. And you know what I'm going to permission, Paul, to say what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Actually, yeah.
Well, when it came to going through the books, the one that stood out, that I just thought this guy Sinclair is a one-off, because he couldn't make this up. It spooked me. Someone somewhere, some god somewhere, has got a finger on him and looking after him, and it was the one of the oh God, what are these people? The click, what are they? Click people? What are they? Tick, yeah, the Tick couple. It was a sort of a local Men in Black story, as far as I was concerned.
Horrible, terrifying.
And I know it's one that Paul really doesn't like talking about, so he won't talk about it now. Buy the book. It was in Night People.
I'm not. It's not one of these I don't like talking about it, but I'm gonna do. I just want to say it took a bit of debate whether they're actually going to put it in book.
Yeah, I had to persuade you. It was so good reading. I mean, I'm not saying it was risible or silly, but it was so
Yeah.
But that was a very compelling story, because it was so different as well.
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Can I go off at a tangent for a minute, because we've got a few more minutes.
Yeah, please do.
We'll come back to questions in a minute. I just wanted to slightly revisit Jacques Valet, because I said he's a chap who looks at parallel explanations and overlap of phenomena much more studiously and with much more qualification than I do. And I found the name of the book that I've put on Paul's site. You can download in its entirety. It's called Passport to Magnolia. That's what you want to look for. Now, the thing about Valet, what he says is that interdimensional, I have to quote here, because it's a bit muddly, interdimensional visitors may try their best to blend in. And this idea has come up, you know, when we see a UFO, to some extent, they manifest themselves at times into things like what we expect to see, which is really throws up a whole range of philosophies we've touched on, which is why nowadays we see spacemen emerging from spaceships. They were just ahead of our time in 1947, but we understand the Lonnie Zamora thing, whereas 100 years ago we wouldn't. And he brings it up by, I wonder how many of our audience, probably everybody, the airships cases in the United States in 1996 and thereabouts happened all over the country. Strange, bloody great airships hovering over village. And for my reading of it, when I first read them, I thought, oh God, they look as if they were sort of Yahoo Henrys, flappers and posh people from the 20s. And they were sort of, I don't know, I'm imagining, I have pictures of them sort of smoking long cigarettes and having a G&T in their hand. They were very casual, weren't they? The reports, They were very strange people. They weren't sort of scientists or spacemen or anything. And they're mentioned by Valet, who sort of says, well, perhaps they tried to get in tune with the airships of the future, but they got it a bit wrong. And my mind immediately leapt to my, you know where I'm going, Paul, with my Men in Black stories. The white faces, the bad lips, the badly done eyes, the bad hairline. They tried to get it right, but they didn't. Yeah. And that's how we can sort of accept them.
It's interesting. And like you said, Valet, his thinking, I mean, and he's still around, his thinking's probably even better. But the nuts and bolts UFOs, everything's, the classic flying saucer, the 60s and 1960s, we're kind of not seeing that now, and the triangles of the 90s. And if we're to believe Valet's theory then, or thoughts on it, it's just our advancement, and they're shaping what they think we should be seeing. Is that where we're going with this?
Yes, and it could well be that, you know, in 100 years' time when we're gone, that we will see flying over Heathrow great big black shapes that are 2 football pitches wide, like the Phoenix Light ships, that are run by British Airways. You know?
Yeah. Interestingly, you know, in archive, when I was going through microfilm, the Phantom airships were seen over East Yorkshire in 1909.
Really?
Oh yeah, I found loads of reports of them. But what were interesting was that they were seeing these things coming over, shaped like what we describe as submarines or big torpedoes.
Yes.
Huge searchlights on them, but then they'd say that the witnesses would say things that sort of defied what it could have been. Then it'd go away at lightning speed and just dissolve into nothing but a dot. And I've got some of them reports. I've actually thought about writing about these things. I've printed copies off as well, you know. So they were there in 1909, East and North Yorkshire. The airships, the Phantom airships, which is interesting. I didn't realise that it were the late 1800s in America. I didn't realise that. So when do we know the date when people invented the airship, or when because I don't
know. I mean, we're talking about sort of the Zeppelin era. I thought it was round about the First World War. I don't know which side.
Okay.
But I'm sure it wasn't 1896.
No, or 1909.
Yeah.
But there again,
Well, especially to shoot off at speed.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay, Les.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll just add to that, and it's not my knowledge, but Google's knowledge. The first successful airship was constructed by Henry Giffard of France in 1852.
Oh, good God.
So
there you go. So once again, there's a possibility then that we could have been looking at man-made technology, but it's interesting.
Okay, then do you want a couple of questions, guys?
I don't think you'll believe that, Don, do you?
Well, I'm not sure whether it was an airship or an air balloon at that period.
Okay.
I mean, there were hot air balloons from 1850 onwards, and I know that they kicked off in France. But anyway, we'd have to research that a bit better.
Yeah, okay, I'm just looking at two pictures and the cigar-shaped airship that they've got on there, yeah. Right, okay, I've got a couple more questions for you guys, all right?
Yeah, please do. It'll be about winding us up then, I think. Kurt, thank you very much.
We've got about 14 minutes. Let's have a look then. Teresa Walker is asking, sorry it's took a long while to get to your question, Teresa. Do you think the human genome has been tinkered with by off-world beings?
I don't know, Teresa. Seriously, I don't know. I know we can have I don't know. And before I say I don't know one more time, Dean Coolings just said Don's correct. It was balloons. So I know Les is looking at something there that's showing a torpedo-shaped thing, but I'm just commenting on that. So Don, do you want to try and answer that one?
No, I mean it's very tempting to, and I just think that is one of the things we don't know. I mean, I know genetically our genes carry an awful lot of weird and redundant information that has not much to do with us. So there might be some secret code or some final message for mankind from something. Who knows? But no, I think one is wise to keep away from that one.
Okay.
Okay, I've got another question from... Right then, Ralph Winter is asking a question for Don. Have you ever taken LSD or oh, I can't pronounce the word. You might see it in the chat, Paul, but it's LSD or mushrooms. Psychedelic mushrooms. Yeah.
The answer's no. I've come near them. I've been with people who've had them. I had a mate in my late teens who took some LSD, and it completely. He did it at his home on the night that his dad had a heart attack, and it completely fucked him up for years. He couldn't drive for a decade. He just saw flashing lights and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a bit like thumping the telly.
Sorry, Don, but I've got to pull you up because on the F word.
We'll probably
sorry.
Yeah. They're very sensitive on YouTube, Don. I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Well, I'll have to tell Chris Williamson that. He does it all the time, but there we go.
No worries. It's all good. So have we anything else there question-wise?
Have Don or Paul ever heard of the news reports of the lady who was allegedly eaten by foxes in Scotland?
Another one. It's too. I believe it's too delicate. This is current, and the news reports allege that a lady's been found partially eaten by animals, and maybe that's just what it is, and it's a tragedy. We can't. I don't think we can attach some kind of unexplained phenomena to everything, and I think that's probably one of them. And
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
You know, I've had people contacting me and just saying it. I'll not even say what they think it is and what they think it might be. And I think that it doesn't do our cause any good to start saying that kind of thing either. You know, speculating on. And no disrespect to whoever's asked question, you know, it's because I've had plenty of people asking me myself and sending me messages, but I've got no views on it because I've got no knowledge on it, and I think it would be unfair to families and people involved. Maybe when dust settled and if more information comes to light, then we can start speculating. But that's all it would be. For the most part, I think it's just a tragedy. Okay.
Yeah, and. Scottish Paranormal Podcast is asking, what's your thoughts on the connection with geomagnetic anomalies and the phenomena?
Well, it is interesting that particularly in the area where the fishermen report, one of them's reported advanced time. There's a magnetic anomaly in that area, and got to be careful. The aircraft that have been lost tragically off Flamborough and Bempton are around the magnetic anomaly. The spheres of light that are seen are around the magnetic anomaly. Primarily, you know, a lot of the rock anglers will say that they're fishing at what's called the Five Arches when they're seeing them. That particular location is not where they appear, but it's where they're seen from, and it just happens to be off from where the anomaly is. And so that, I suppose it's interesting. I mean, once again, I don't know the reasons for it. Any views on magnetic anomalies, Don?
No, it all sounds very plausible. I mean, I know Tim Brennan knows more than most of us on ley lines and things like that. Yeah. And I think, you know, they're very interesting, and I haven't firmly tied anything up, but worth considering. Very much so, and worth collating things. It'd be nice to do a study of all the reports and see where they are in relation to a ley line. There's a future task for somebody.
Well, Philip Walters sometimes comes in the chat, and Philip's been really good to me over years with information and things. I know he were a good friend of Tony Dodds and other researchers, and Philip's already brought that up and talking about Danes Dyke and do these areas of ice strangeness, are the burial mounds in all these other locations, are the ley lines crossing them? I know at Willie Howe, I've never done dowsing. I don't know whether you've done that before. I've done it once.
No.
And me and Mary did Willie Howe, the burial mound at Burton Fleming. We made 2 rods, put them into copper tubes, went on a sunny afternoon, and I can tell you, whatever's happening, it does work. These things did turn in without our assistance, and we pegged it, and it was an interesting experience. And it's like an hot cross bun. You know that we found these things. What they mean, I don't know. Is maybe water running underneath. It's you know, I don't know what the mechanisms are that create this effect so that they'll turn. Some magnetic effect, I don't know.
Okay. Westwater 73 is asking, have you heard anything of the Italian Skinwalker equivalents?
No.
No, I'd like to.
It's interesting.
Tell us about it. Yeah,
we don't know anything there. Westwater 73, but a great question. Alison Buttle is asking, a simple question, Paul. I don't know the answer to this one at the moment. Can I ask you, where do I get Bringing Down the Light?
Myself and Chris Turner, I believe Chris has got some copies. So, Alison, if you want to contact me after, we'll see what we can sort out, because we did get some hard copies of Bringing Down the Light. So, yeah, we'll get that sorted. And on that note, I think we're just about wound up, aren't we?
Yeah.
No, not quite, Paul.
Okay.
Not according to my clock. What
I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush.
Yeah, I've got 8 minutes on here. Let's have a look. Question from AXC is asking, do the gents feel it would be feasible, it's a good question, would be feasible to set up a national network of credible researchers? Obviously, some would have to decide who was credible.
That there's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because we've all got various degrees of what we believe is proof and what we believe, or where we believe this phenomena originates. I think there'd be a lot of arguing. I don't know what you think, Don.
Oh yeah, I think it would have to be done privately. What we want is a really big, powerful sort of Elon Musk character to come along and manage it. But I don't think we couldn't formally have a university doing it, because academia would get the pressures, some of them. We couldn't get the military doing it because they wouldn't share. We couldn't get politics doing it because they bloody lie. So we'd have to do it privately. And that would be great to sort of pull together all the work that's going on,
Yeah.
around Birmingham, or you, our friends in Swansea, and we could make a list on the back of an envelope in 10 minutes and sort of get all these together and have someone professionally do databases and publish a magazine or something, or do something online.
What would be needed. You're spot on, Don. Obviously, the information we've collected, the Swansea guys, all the organisations, if they weren't so precious and they'd allow the information to be pooled and then get data analysis as people, professional guys, look for patterns, that would be the way to go, instead of the internal arguing that I think would surface.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, then I've got a question.
It's a great idea. That's something to look for. We'll be nice to rich people, I think. It's my resolution to the new year.
I've just given you a direction to go in that, Don. I think you're quite interested.
I think the other thing would be nice to get a webcam looking out over the North Sea, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. It would be fabulous.
If you go to Shetland webcam online, you can see at the moment, you can see the Eshenes Lighthouse. You're looking north, and if a UFO or the Northern Lights appears there, you'd see them live now, and we want something like that.
Oh, well, obviously, I don't think that they'd do it, but I know the RSPB have cameras looking at the seabirds.
Yeah.
And I think they're automated. I think they can move them and that, and obviously people will have access to that. Or I don't know whether they're members, but most of them will be looking at the nesting sites. But it'd be wonderful if we could get them to turn them cameras out to sea on a night.
We want a rich sponsor to come along and say he'll buy them 100 tons of birdseed every month if we can put a camera on. And there we are.
Yeah, there you go. Go on then, Les.
Yeah, Tim Brennan is asking, Don, what's your take on ley lines?
Oh God, I hate to. I've said it a lot tonight. I don't know.
Well, isn't it a good thing to say, Don? Because I find myself saying it all the time.
I mean, I've read bits about them because I grew up in the south of England where you can't go out the back garden without tripping over a ley line down there, and you've got Salisbury Plain and Avebury, which I know very well because my parents used to live at Marlborough. I mean, I've been around them, and I've talked to people who. Say everything functions from a ley line, and you're better if you sleep on the one, and you're more likely to get pregnant if you screw on one, and all these things. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of. Sorry, did I use a word that I shouldn't have done? There's a lot of things that people attribute to ley lines, and I think it's an area that really does need some study, and I'm sure there are. It'd be great to get somebody on the program who could talk, for an hour or two about ley lines linking to our phenomena. It'd be very interesting.
It would, and I know Tim's got a bit of knowledge on it. I don't know how much, but we're almost there now, I think. So if he's got another question, we can. I don't know.
Oh,
hang on. I'll just ask that then. Yeah, who could you pick to come on the show? Umbraman is asking if you had a choice.
I'd have Whitley Strieber on because Whitley's been good to me over the years.
I'd agree with you. What about you, Don?
I suppose in terms of maybe entertaining some of your newer guests, and I know we've got some very scholarly guests here, and some are not. So I think Peter Davenport is very good value, very convincing, and to see his video of the Phoenix Lights night when he was on duty, getting all these calls coming in, is wonderful. And I'd love to see him do a repeat of that with you.
Okay, and some great guests mentioned there. Alison Butler's asking, Paul. Don, what is your thoughts on time travel? Well, on that note, I don't think I'm going to give you a chance to answer that, guys. So
with time travel, you could, Les. With a bit of time travel, we could do it for another 10 minutes, and you'd never know.
That was my. You've just took my finishing line there, Don. That was my finishing line on time travel.
I'll tell you yesterday, love. I'll tell you yesterday.
Yeah, on that, I've got to thank Don Lodge for coming on as tonight's guest, and Paul Sinclair.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Les, Don, Deb. Been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Well, there you go, guys. That was very interesting. I got to thank everybody for all the questions tonight. So everybody who's tuned in from all over the UK and all around the world, we do hope you enjoyed this session of the Truthproof live stream. With a good following wind, we'll be back next week. We'll see you all then. See ya.